Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/BrianEDenton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 218. Chapter 218. Beside himself with terror, Pierre jumped up and ran back to the battery, as to the only refuge from the horrors that surrounded him. On entering the earthwork, he noticed that there were men doing something there, but that no shots were being fired from the battery. He had no time to realize who these men were. He saw the senior officer lying on the earth wall with his back turned as if he were examining something down below, and that one of the soldiers he had noticed before was struggling forward, shouting, "Brothers!" and trying to free himself from some men who were holding him by the arm. He also saw something else that was strange. But he had not had time to realize that the colonel had been killed, that the soldier shouting "Brothers" was a prisoner, and that another man had been bayoneted in the back before his eyes, for hardly had he run into the redoubt before a thin, sallow-faced, perspiring man in a blue uniform rushed on him, sword in hand, shouting something. Instinctively guarding against the shock, for they had been running together at full speed before they saw one another, Pierre put out his hands and seized the man, a French officer, by the shoulder with one hand and by the throat with the other. The officer, dropping his sword, seized Pierre by his collar. For some seconds they gazed with frightened eyes at one another's unfamiliar faces, and both were perplexed at what they had done and what they were to do next. "Am I to take prisoner, or am I to be taken prisoner?" each was thinking. But the French officer was evidently more inclined to think that he had been taken prisoner, because Pierre's strong hand, impelled by instinctive fear, squeezed his throat ever tighter and tighter. The Frenchman was about to say something when, just above their heads, terrible and low, a cannonball whistled, and it seemed to Pierre that the French officer's head had been torn off, so swiftly had he ducked it. Pierre too bent his head and let his hands fall. Without further thought as to who had taken whom prisoner, the Frenchman ran back to the battery, and Pierre ran down the slope stumbling over the dead and wounded who, it seemed to him, caught at his feet. But before he reached the foot of the knoll, he was met by a dense crowd of Russian soldiers, who, stumbling, tripping up, and shouting, ran merrily and wildly toward the battery. This was the attack for which Ermolov claimed the credit, declaring that only his courage and luck made for such a feat to be possible. It was the attack in which he was said to have thrown some of St. George's crosses he had in his pockets into the battery for the first soldiers to take who got there. The French who had occupied the battery fled, and our troops, shouting "Hurrah!" pursued them so far beyond the battery that it was difficult to call them back. The prisoners who were brought down from the battery, and among them was a wounded French general whom the officers surrounded. Crowds of wounded, some known to Pierre and some unknown, Russians and French, with faces distorted by suffering, walked, crawled, and were carried on stretchers from the battery. Pierre again went up to the knoll where he had spent over an hour, and of that family circle which had received him as a member, he did not find a single one. There were many dead whom he did not know, but some he recognized. The young officer still sat in the same way, bent double, in a pool of blood at the edge of the earth wall. The red-faced man was still twitching, but they did not carry him away. Pierre ran down the slope once more. "Now they will stop it. Now they will be horrified at what they have done," he thought, aimlessly going towards a crowd of stretcher-bearers moving from the battlefield. But behind the veil of smoke the sun was still high, and in front, and especially on the left, near Semenovsk, something seemed to be seething in the smoke, and the roar of cannon and musketry did not diminish, but even increased to desperation, like a man who, straining himself, shrieks with all his remaining strength. That concludes my reading of chapter 218, probably one of the most intense in the entire novel in terms of war chapters. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 218. They will not stop it. They are not horrified at what they have done. Mankind may have been created in the image of God, but it's Satan they model their behavior after. What else are we to make of a chapter like today's, where mutilated bodies decorate the earth, strangers charge at each other's throats, and a murderous terror animates the hearts of men? Pierre is horrified at it all. Surely, he tells himself, these men will stop what they're doing once they see what they've done. Men have seen what they've done. A parade of unspeakably brutal histories precede the Battle of Borodino, beating a savage march of war, rapine, and wickedness. Our chronicles of butchery are no great secret. Nevertheless, we persist. The time for an accurate redefinition of the word humanity is, it seems, long overdue. One of the central questions of War and Peace is how to live in a world with so much humanity. One potential answer hinted at throughout the book appears in today's chapter. Previously, we have noted how often Tolstoy contrasts nature's detached view with the madness of mankind's drama. We see this literary device again today. Quote, "But behind the veil of smoke the sun was still high, and in front and especially to the left, near Smemryansk, something seemed to be seething in the smoke, and the roar of cannon and musketry did not diminish, but even increased to desperation, like a man who, straining himself, shrieks with all his remaining strength." The sun, sheds some light on how we should live in a world so brutal and unforgiving. We should elevate ourselves to its height, taking an expansive view from above of all the seeming horrors below, until the horrors shrink into the true nature of insignificance. Daily Meditation. Thou canst remove out of thy way many useless things among those which disturb thee, for they lie entirely in thy opinion, and thou wilt then gain for thyself ample space by comprehending the whole universe in thy mind, and by contemplating the eternity of time, and observing the rapid change of every several thing. How short is the time from birth to dissolution, and the illimitable time before birth as well as the equally boundless time after dissolution. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. And that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 218. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow, we will be reading and reflecting on chapter 219 of War and Peace. I hope you join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.